Welcome back to the Conference USA Podcast Roundtable. I'm your host for the evening, Jake Bolden, and this weekend we have the game we've really been waiting for a couple weeks now. It's come to fruition. You have two undefeated Conference USA teams as Kennesaw State travels to Jacksonville State this weekend. A lot to be excited about, and we are joined by two of our members of the Roundtable, Kai Millett of Owl Chat Podcast and Caleb Williams of the 700 Pelham Road Podcast. What makes this even more exciting is the rivalry behind it, but I want to take a second, introduce our two guests today. Kai, we'll start off with you from the OCP Owl Chat Podcast. Kai, this time last year, maybe I'm a little ahead, but I have to imagine your coach was either fired or about to get fired at this point last year, and now you're undefeated, playing for a spot in the CUSA Championship. What a 365 days it's been for Owl fans.
Yeah, you're telling me. I think we just passed the 1 year anniversary of Bohannon's firing. It was after a double overtime loss to UTEP. And what's funny is, I've now done this Game of the Week show more times this year than the team had wins last year. So I think that's a pretty good indication that things are going in the right direction.
Absolutely. Well, on the other side, Jack State, they're no stranger to this situation. They certainly have found themselves into close games down the stretch, but now they're back home. They're going to be facing Kennesaw. Again, a big rivalry game. Caleb, to you here. First, welcome back. And then secondly, did you anticipate this matchup even have any implications that it is on top of already being a rivalry game? But, with all intents and purposes, this is a spot in the championship game.
No, I didn't have any thoughts of this game being what it is, to start the season. I wasn't even really sure that we would be in position to potentially have a spot in the championship game on our own, let alone Kennesaw as well. I felt like, with what we lost, with Kennesaw still kind of, I don't want to say adjusting, but, building up their program, to adjust to FBS. I just felt like it was going to be one of those games where one of us is going to be fighting for a spot in the bowl game. But, here we are. And for us, for all intents and purposes, rivalry week, like you said, not only a spot in the championship game, but just to ask me, I think the winner of this one's going to host the championship game. So I think that's a huge deal for Saturday night.
Well, how did we get here? Looking at Kennesaw State in their season, they started 0-2. Now they've ripped off 7 straight wins. Really, for the most part of Conference USA, has had a comfortable road. They were in Las Cruces last weekend, and Jerry Mack did what he did a lot this year, and that's get to an offensive hot start, but had to lean heavily on that defense, going scoreless in that second half. They give up 2 touchdowns there late, make the game a little bit interesting. But I would say, as someone that didn't watch the game in full, I was too busy watching my team lose again on a Saturday. But I was watching on the side. Kai, give me a little bit of nuance to that game. Was it in hand, or did things get a little crazy there at the end for you?
I don't think the game felt like it was in question till the final New Mexico State drive. But again, it's like we've seen this story 3 or 4 times already this year, where KSU goes up, 3 or 4 possessions in the opening quarter or the opening quarter and a half, and then just can't move the ball the rest of the game. And you're kind of just hoping and praying and leaning on the defense that they see this thing out. And for most of the New Mexico State game, it felt that way. It never really felt that in question until Amari Odom throws a pick late in the fourth quarter, and all of a sudden it's, oh shoot, New Mexico State has the ball in a rhythm with like 3 minutes to go, and they were able to set up a 50-yard kick, which ended up being no good. So it would be wrong of me to say that the game was never in question, because at one point in the fourth quarter it certainly was, but for most of it you felt like Kennesaw State was kind of just going to see it out in the way that they had the previous 4 times they had been in the same situation.
Caleb, how did Jack State get here? I know they're on a 4-game win streak themselves, but really the storyline of those last 4 wins, 3 of them being on the road, all by a single possession. I guess if you're Jack State, you're just happy to be home. It's funny to me to see how night and day different this team is when they're at home versus on the road.
Yeah, I think we spoke, I guess it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, before. Actually, I think it was our game. Actually, when we played midweek, and I mean, on the road, we're just a grinded out football team. That's how we're going to have to win games. And it was certainly true, this last month. Like you said, every road win we've had has been by single digits. And every road loss we've had, except for UCF, has been by multiple scores. So it's just one of those things where when we come home, we look like James Madison. When we're on the road, we look like 2024 Kent State. I mean, it's night and day. So yeah, it's good to be home. And for a night game, now we know it's going to be a blackout. Obviously being a Saturday night means, and with it being Marching Southerners Union, everyone's going to be in town. It's just good to have an atmosphere that finally favors us just a little bit.
Do you think if this was on the road at Kennesaw, you would be skeptical of the outcome?
If this were on the road at Kennesaw, we'd probably be double-digit dogs right now. Not because I think that we're a bad football team or because, Kennesaw's elite. I think both teams are really good, but we're so different on the road, especially offensively, that I would struggle to see us, at least, betting line wise, I'd struggle to see us being any less than a 10-point dog.
Certainly something I'll keep tabs on because the season's not over, obviously. You still have 2 more games after this one, including one on the road at FIU before you come back home against Western Kentucky. But let's get into this game in particular on Saturday, kicking off at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. The game did get flexed to ESPNU. So Conference USA getting that spotlight again at prime time. Great to see. I think what's even better about this rivalry matchup is you got 2 first-year head coaches that are jockeying for that position to kind of claim, I would say, Coach of the Year rights as well. That's something that I think you're keeping eyes on. But Kai, let's get into this game matchup. What are the storylines for you guys in particular? I know I just touched on it. Obviously, Jerry Mack's introduction into this rivalry. Jack State's running offense. How are you going to be able to contain them? Does the quarterback play come into any sort of question for you guys? What storylines to you kind of stand out as a big part of this game?
Yeah, I mean, the quarterback play has been a weird storyline the entire season. They've been flip-flopping between Mariota and Dexter Williams throughout the year. Now, the last 4 or 5 weeks, it's been more so, hey, Amari's banged up, and we feel like we can go win with Dexter, so we're going to play him. But after the UTEP game, we learned that, hey, 80% of Mariota should be rolling out there over Dexter Williams. Now, however, Amari had his worst half of football all year in the second half against New Mexico State, threw a couple of picks, felt like he missed just about every throw in that game. So, if Amari Odom comes out and has a bad half, especially against a defense like the 3-3-5, that, you have to have that seniority and that understanding of opposing defenses to beat. Maybe Dexter gets a look, but I think things would have to get really bad for that to be the case. I mean, look, the story here is stopping Cam Cook. He is one of the best running backs, not only in Conference USA, but I believe in the country. You don't really fear the Jacksonville State passing game. I know Creel's had his moments, but all of the emphasis is going to be on Cam Cook. And look, KSU's hot right now, and with a team that may be unfamiliar with winning and winning in this volume, you fear complacency a little bit. You lost 2 games earlier in the season, like you mentioned, to Wake Forest and Indiana, but those are losses you kind of expect. You don't go in trying, with the expectation of losing those games, but you get over those pretty quickly as, we're going on the road. We're not supposed to beat these teams. And now they've rallied off 7 straight, and you worry, like, have they forgotten what it's like to lose? And, do they know how to avoid that? And then the way Jacksonville State has been able to just churn out these close games. You don't start 5-0 in conference on accident. They've had close games, but they've found ways to win, and that's what's important. So if this game comes down to the wire, I think you start feeling pretty nervous.
Take a step back to that quarterback situation. Could you just imagine what this team could be like if they just, I don't want to say Amari Odom or Dexter Williams aren't average quarterbacks, but if they had an A-tier quarterback, how good this Kennesaw State team could be?
I think Amari Odom's ceiling is an A-tier quarterback. There have been times this year where Amari has played so well that we've been worried about him making the jump up next year. I don't know if he's going to string together the season when it's all said and done to do that, but it's certainly been a thought that's crossed all of our minds. He has his ups, he has his downs, but when he's up, man, is he up. And, I think we're still kind of waiting for him to string together that full game. And when that happens, the opponent's in trouble.
Caleb, I'll throw it back to you here, kind of the storylines you're keeping an eye on. I mean, every week it seems like teams are obviously preparing for Cam Cook, but they don't ever have an answer for the guy. I guess for you, are you looking for him just to kind of have that same game he's had all year long? I mean, I know the quarterback play as far as being a passing presence is non-existent, but there's no reason to be concerned about that because you're still 5-0 in Conference USA.
Yeah, it's like you said, every team at this point is selling out. I mean, we're seeing 7, 8-man boxes pretty much every snap, and teams aren't afraid of our receivers outside, regardless of who's at quarterback. And it's not that I don't think they're talented, but we've gotten them the ball only a handful of times all season. But it hasn't mattered. Like you said, it just hasn't mattered. And I think it's, Cam Cook, he's not just strong, he's not just fast. He breaks tackles, 2 or 3 tackles almost every run. So it's not that our offensive line is just bowling people over like it was last year. Cam Cook's doing a lot of it on his own. I mean, he's just breaking more tackles than I think I've seen a JSU running back break since I'd say 2015 when they went to the national championship game. Now, I will say this last week, Caden Curl I thought had his best game throwing the football. Made a lot of really, really good throws down the field as well. Hit a couple shots downfield that either moved the chains or resulted in a score. And that was on the road. Again, you talk about how poorly we've played away from Burgess Snow. I thought Caden Curl had his best game, and he did it on the road. So that is, encouraging coming back home this week that, Clint Trickett and company have been able to finally kind of find a game plan that suits his skill set and find a way to get him easy completions so that later in the game we have the confidence to push it downfield and stretch teams vertically.
Who are the impact players? Of course, what were the picks made by the Conference USA Roundtable members and our score predictions from yours truly here? But before we kind of dive into those details, let's thank today's sponsor. Conseco Group has been transforming visions into reality since 1987. Known for making the impossible possible, they specialize in pre-construction consulting, construction management, design build, and renovations. With a hands-on, client-focused approach, Conseco Group consistently delivers high-quality results while maximizing investment. Based in Nashville and trusted across Middle Tennessee, their reach spans the entire Southeast. Conseco Group, building excellence one project at a time. Learn more at consecogroup.com or call 615-298-9907. Thanks again to the Conseco Group for sponsoring today's game of the week, Week 12 matchup where Kennesaw State travels to Jacksonville State, again at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central kickoff. We're joined by Kai Millett of the Owl Chat podcast. Kai, for you guys, I want to hear who are the names that we need to keep an eye on. I know you talked about the quarterback already, Odom. 80% Odom is probably going to end up stepping on that field this Saturday, but who are the impact players for you guys if you want to be victorious on Saturday?
Yeah, offensively, the best weapon is Gabriel Benyard, who will probably end up being an all-conference player. And he's also, I think, 42 yards away from breaking the single-season record. It's going to be interesting to watch him, though, because so much of his production has come over the top, right? And Jack State defensively is so focused on not getting beat over the top. I think they're one of the most zone-heavy defenses in the country. So it's going to be interesting to see if he's able to free up and be much of a factor in this one. Because, like I said, so much of his production is, the 1 or 2 times they're able to find him over the top in any given game. Chase Belcher, the running back who has sort of emerged as the new RB1, RB2, and maybe even surpassed Coleman Bennett when you look at some of the numbers, is just, like one of our podcast members, Barclay, says he's built like a Greek god. Just huge kid, just barrels over you and has some nice speed. It's going to be interesting to see how they manage the carries between Coleman Bennett and Chase Belcher. And then defensively, one of our better linebackers, Garland Benyard, went down a couple games ago. And Tywan Christopher stepped up and has arguably been an upgrade at the position as a freshman. He's been good dropping back in coverage and also just creating havoc in the middle of the field. And then Elijah Hill's a guy who they brought in as a freshman. And we have theorized on our podcast that they were trying to hide him early in the season because he goes from playing 20% of the snaps in the first couple of games or whatever it was to leading the conference in sacks and seemingly always living in that backfield. Defensively, or beyond that defensively, Caleb Offord and Jericho Washington, I think, are as good of a DB1 and DB2 as anybody has in the conference. And then, special teams, Benyard is fantastic as a punt returner. He's taken one back this year already. And Joshua Hewitt, the punter, is a game changer, to say the least.
Caleb, same to you. Again, our friend Caleb Williams over at the 700 Pelham Road Podcast. Impact players for you guys on Saturday at home?
I think the easy answer, and we've talked about it multiple times, it's always going to be Cam Cook. If we get him going, that's usually good news for us offensively. I'm actually going to go two different guys that are not Cam Cook, though. I'm going to go DeAndre Johnson at receiver. He's really, the last 2 or 3 games, started to get going downfield. He's 6'8", 220 pounds, and it's taken us, 8 games to figure out how to get him the ball. And finally, we figured out, how to stretch the field with him. So getting him going early, I think, is a big, big component of whether or not we're going to score some points this weekend. And then on defense, I've mentioned his name multiple times. Got to go with Caleb Nix. I think he's now responsible for 3 defensive touchdowns. I think a scoop and score and 2 pick sixes this year. He's got a handful of other turnovers that he has either forced or helped cause. And so to have a safety, Kai mentioned, how heavy we are zone, especially deep. We're pretty much going to always have 2 safeties deep, or we're going to be in cover 3. And so having a guy like Caleb who's just playing center field, always making plays, I think it's crucial for him against a team like Kennesaw who wants to push the ball downfield, running that Josh Heupel offense. They want to throw deep shots. We know that. So having a guy like him who can really kind of sit over the top, I think it's crucial that he's got to get going and create some plays in the passing game.
Kai, question for you here. One thing that's interesting when I dive into the stats of this game or stats behind these 2 teams, Kennesaw by far one of the best pass rushing defenses in this conference. They lead the conference in sack numbers, but the rushing defense isn't necessarily what I would say up to that level. I guess you can provide me a little bit more nuance to why those stats. There's a disparity there. Why is this front 7 so good at getting to the quarterback, but maybe not necessarily as good in rush defense?
They're a little bit banged up on the front 7. I mentioned Garland Benyard being out for the season already, and even though Tywan Christopher may have stepped in and been a better player at that position, that's still, a level of depth that you lose regardless, right? With how many guys you cycle in and out. Tylon Dunlap has missed some time. And Adam Watkins seems to cramp up 3 or 4 times a game. So it's really only been a concern since FIU. I think FIU went for like 230 yards to 250 yards on the ground, sort of exposed that front 7 in the running game a little bit. Now the offense was firing on all cylinders that game, so it didn't really matter. But since then, you've seen some struggle against the run game. That being said, I think New Mexico State, who is one of the worst rush offenses in America, I think having that game was good as sort of a get-right game, just earning guys a little bit of confidence, as well as healing guys up. I mentioned Tylon Dunlap, who I think is tied for 3rd in the conference in sacks, and Elijah Hill, who's at 6.5. He suffered an injury, and we were fearful that he was going to be out for the season because of some incorrect information reported on the broadcast of, I think, the UTEP game. That wasn't the case. He's back in action, and he's been super valuable this year. So I think it's just been a matter of guys have been banged up, and there's been, a little bit of inconsistency with who's running out there week to week.
Well, when it comes to sack numbers, again, these are two of the better offensive lines, but you have to throw something to the Gamecocks. They are second to Kennesaw State in terms of sacks allowed, but obviously we know how good the rush offense is with Cam Cook and that zone read offense. But Caleb, would you go as far to say that this is the best offensive line? I know last year's team, probably you could make an argument for them, but this offensive line really hasn't skipped a beat from last year.
Yeah, I think I would go – I'd probably say they're probably tied. I think, you look at last year, they did a lot less schematically. Really, we only ran 2 or 3 plays on offense and really only had a couple protections, but we did it so fast that teams couldn't line up in time for it to matter. But this year they're doing a lot more complex offense under Trickett, and they've executed really well. I've really been impressed with how they've done. Then, you mentioned the sack numbers. Part of that is just limited opportunities for teams to get sacks because we don't throw the ball very often. But we've been efficient protecting, even if it's Wimsat, we've protected Gavin pretty well. We've protected Caden really well for the most part. Obviously you're going to have some plays where sometimes an assignment just gets missed. But as a whole, Rick Trickett, as the offensive line coach, has continued to have his unit ready to go. I can't quite put him over last year. And maybe it's just nostalgia for how good that team was, and you just knew you weren't ever going to get into the backfield. But no, I got to give them credit. They've been outstanding this season. Honestly, if we had a little more execution from the quarterback position, I think people would talk about this line more because they'd have a little bit better chance to showcase just how good they were.
Well, Saturday's kickoff at 8 p.m. Eastern. The storyline that I'm following is, for whatever reason, and Vegas always knows better than I do, but the line continues to grow in the Owls' favor. At the time of this recording, they are at 3.5-point favorites on the road at Jack State. They opened as 1.5-point favorites. You could basically say a pick 'em, but now at 3.5 points, you would say that Kennesaw State is favored in this matchup. Kai, when we look at the Conference USA roundtable, which I can't show the completed graphic at the time of this recording because we're still missing one of our members, but right now there's only 3 roundtable picks for Kennesaw State. Even though they are favored by Vegas, there's only 3 persons that have chosen them, including the Owl Chat podcast, our friends at the bus stop, New Mexico State, and then March to the Pod, Sam Houston State. So something about the guys out west have belief in Kennesaw, but so does Vegas. Maybe, again, it's something out west on the other side of the Mississippi. But Kai, are you surprised to hear that?
Maybe a little bit. Here's what people have to remember, and I'm sure Caleb will agree with me on this one. These 2 schools, these 2 teams, these 2 fan bases hate each other. I think this is one of the most underrated rivalries, not only in the conference, but the country. It feels like genuine despise. It feels like old school, type of hate, I guess is the only word, not to piggyback on the Georgia Tech rivalry name. But you're going to get the best game from both teams, especially with what's at stake. This is a year's worth of bragging rights. It's almost one of those games where you throw the records out the window, right? And it just so happens that both teams are in contention to win the conference this year, so it matters that much more. I think there's no question this game comes down to the wire and is a competitive game. I don't think this one is lopsided in either way. So I understand. I don't think picking Jacksonville State is a totally unreasonable pick, especially at their place. That being said, if there wasn't that same tension and this was a neutral site game, I would lean towards the Owls.
Kai, if you could, what's the score prediction you got for us?
I'm not going to pick against Kennesaw State. I feel like that would just be wrong. I think Jacksonville State does their best to slow this one down, maintain possession, take Kennesaw State out of rhythm, and I think you see a lower scoring game. I think KSU's due for some explosive plays in each and every game. I think you see something along the lines of 24-21 KSU.
So Kai has them comfortably going under the 55.5 point total, which I actually kind of like that, the under. But Caleb, same to you. Are you surprised that the roundtable is so in heavy favorites with the quote unquote underdogs for this matchup? And then you too, how do you see this one playing out? What's your score prediction?
From a roundtable standpoint, I think a lot of it maybe for people who, especially I'd say the newer members to the conference who maybe don't know this rivalry quite well enough yet, or maybe the people who maybe, even have been in the conference but don't really see it, especially the people out west. Kai's right. I mean, this rivalry, it's maybe not Iron Bowl or, the game, but it's a lot like Georgia Tech, where hate's the only word that I can come up with. Like I've said this to many people before. There's only a couple schools in the country that I just genuinely detest everything that has to do with them, and I think Kennesaw is one of them. I mean, it's Alabama, Georgia, and Kennesaw, if I'm being honest. So I mean, yeah, Kai's right. It's one of those games you generally throw the record books out. Last year notwithstanding, most of these games have been pretty close, and last year was just one of those. I mean, it's just perfect storm type of games, but this year's totally different. From a Vegas standpoint, what I've learned is they're going to raise the line if a team is getting too many bets because they want to save some money. So all that tells me is they're getting bets in Kennesaw's favor, and they're trying to keep people from betting anymore, or at least try to get people to bet on us to cover. But score prediction, I'm like, I can't pick against the Cox ever. If we were to play, the New England Patriots tomorrow, I'd probably pick us. So I'm going to go kind of I'm thinking 27-24 type game. Yeah, I don't see us covering the total at 55.5. Feels like a lot. That feels like a lot of points in this one. I'm thinking we'll just narrowly miss the total. If I'll say this, if a team gets to 30, they're going to win this football game. There's just knowing how these two teams operate. If a team gets to 30, I don't see them losing this football game. And if they do, that would be a pretty impressive feat.
It definitely feels like either one of these teams, like 30 was the magic number. They both have a playing style that they can almost, if you will, sit on the ball for the remainder of the game. We've seen Kennesaw State do that in games like they did last week, as well as what they did against MTSU earlier this year with 3 quick touchdowns in the first quarter, and their defense were able to lean heavily on. And then Jack State, obviously, running the football just lends itself to running time of possession out. So I think this is by nature going to be a low scoring game. Also, the implication of not only being regular season champs, but hosting potentially the championship game. I think that there's just too much at stake for these offenses to do anything really outside of their norm. And same for these defenses. I think it's going to be a chess match through the first half, at least, again, for the sake of Conference USA and this national spotlight. I hope it's a chess match. I hope this doesn't turn into what we've seen out of some of this MACtion in midweek. So I think we can all agree that Conference USA midweek is way better than MACtion. But I'll save that for another day. But I like Jacksonville State in this one only because it's at home. They've handled their business at home. I know that in most rivalry cases, in a pie chart that I could probably find somewhere, or I could make up for the sake of this argument, home teams tend to win these matchups. There's something about the environment. Jack State, obviously not known for their huge stadium, but the fact that I know that it'll be a ruckus crowd again at prime time on a Saturday night. There's nothing else to do in Jacksonville State but to be at this game, and I'm sure those in Kennesaw had the exact same opinion. I mean, if you could make the trip over to Jacksonville State, why wouldn't you? Because the state of that program a year ago, this is exciting. This is good football for Conference USA. I wish that these two teams had, I would say, stronger non-conference wins. Maybe we'd be talking about some CFP talk here, but that's just the nature of the beast, if you will. But I love this for Conference USA, and I've got Jack State winning this one almost identical to Kai's. I actually had it in a random 23-20. Something crazy is going to happen. We're going to have some field goals. It's going to be wild. That's what I think is going to happen. So I appreciate Kai Millett of the Owl Chat podcast, Caleb Williams of the 700 Pelham Road podcast for joining us, giving us all the insight on these guys. If you're not already, find these guys, follow them on their social media. I'm sure they have plenty of content rolling out this week in preparation for this big game. I appreciate you guys for tuning into today's episode. If you're not already following us at Conference USA Roundtable on Twitter X, or listening to us on our live stream on YouTube, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our Week 13 game of the week. And of course, we've got plenty more with the championship right around the corner and all the bowl games coming forward for us. But until next time, we'll see you next week.